This will be a tour of two-stroke engine. First, we'll start with the gas tank. So you mix your gas with your oil, your two-cycle oil. I mix 32 to 1, and then you put it in your gas tank. Some older bikes used to have separate oil mixers that would be back here, and you put pure gas in, you have just your oil here, and then the oil would cycle in. Usually it would cycle in down by the main crank bearing and just drip onto the bearing down there. Problem with that is, well, if that pump breaks, that system breaks, tube comes off, you don't know it, well, now your bike's gonna blow up, so it's not gonna get any two-cycle oil. You put your gas in here and you have a breather hole here. Obviously that breather hole, as you suck gas out of the tank, you gotta fill it back in with air, so you need to have that breather hole. And usually, well, you should have these hoses on, because when you fill the gas tank all the way up, it's gonna splash out onto you. So the next thing I'm gonna see is what this is called here. It's called a Petcock, and this one here just is on and off. So this one over here, as you can see, has on, off, and reserve. So the idea here is that on will drain most of the gas tank. When we reach a certain level, on is done. You'll know that now I'm running out of gas. Go into reserve, switch it into reserve, and maybe you have, say, perhaps a gallon left, half gallon, enough to get you back. Typically, race dirt bikes don't really have usually don't have a reserve, because they're on the track. They're not going in the woods, so they bog down. You just push them off the side of the track. Where you go in the woods, you need to know to be able to get back. Alright, so what I have here, this is a Petcock. It's just an on Petcock for a Clark gas tank. This one does not have a filter on it. These are typically what the Petcocks look like, and they'll have filters on top of them. I've got several of them here. As you can see, they have these little filters, so you can see they have on-off, reserve. Some of them are formed like this, so they don't really matter which side of the bike they're on, because the back points back and this one points front. So it could be on either side of the bike. You could have a left hand or a right hand Petcock location. There are ones that are made specifically for certain sides. There's only a left-handed one. That's because the fuel line hooks up to the back of it here. And if it was on the other side, then this would actually be facing forward, and that wouldn't work out. So you do have different styles of Petcock that can be used. The next thing after the Petcock is fuel line, and there's different sizes. You want to get the right size for your bike. You don't, if you have a 500, for example, you don't want to get a really small, thin gas line, because it'll suck more gas than you can provide there. You can get these as well. These are inline fuel filters. There are also these quick disconnects. This one, press it, disconnects. So the next thing is the gas will go into the carburetor. This one here is a Keenan. I have several carburetors in here. Here's a Mikuni TM, an older one. Several Bings. So what's the purpose of the carburetor is to regulate air and fuel mixture into the engine. So gas comes in here, and then air comes in the back here. Of course, I'm not going to get into too much detail about how everything works. I'll just go into a little bit for general. But fuel comes in, air comes in, fuel comes in. You have a setting on the side here called the air screw that helps regulate some of the air flow. Now underneath this thing, it has a little clip. It'll look easy. Okay, so within inside the carburetor, you have the first thing is these floats. So when the fuel comes in, it fills up the bottom bowl, and these floats will eventually come up. And what these floats do, as you can see right in there, will shut off the fuel flow so that you don't flood out. And if you do flood out, there's these little tiny overflow. So there's one up here that comes at the bottom. There's some on the side that come out if you lean the bike over. So these shut off the fuel flow. The next thing you'll see here is there's a main jet here. Now, this main jet's actually been taken out. It's not in there. But there's a main jet, there's a pilot jet. The pilot jet generally works at lower RPM. The main jet works at higher RPM. But there's some crossover between the jets. These eventually have a little hole in them, and that's what the engine ends up sucking out the fuel to run, mixing with the air. So the size of this jet helps suck in the fuel. And then as you open up the throttle, see within here you will have the slide, which also has what's known as a needle jet. And we can look at this one. But essentially, that needle jet, there's a needle right there. It has a taper on the side that also regulates the fuel as you open this up. So not only as you open this up is more air coming in because now you have this whole thing open, but also fuel comes in because of this, opens up the main jet, and then the engine sucks in more fuel. Depends on the size of the main jet, depends on the size of this, the taper of this needle jet. Slide can even make a difference to regulate the airflow. And we have two different slides here. One's a flat slide, one's a round slide. And this cutaway also makes a difference. So there's a lot of little tweaks. And certain bikes, all bikes will have basic standard configuration as far as how you set up these jets. And then from your environment and how you ride, you can tune based on a lot of factors. I'm not going to go into any tuning or anything. And on the back side again we have the air, which you would want to have an air filter on top of it. An air filter looks like this. And these air filters prevent dirt and things from going into your engine. You generally oil these up, and the reason you oil these up because small tiny dust particles could try to go through this fabric, but you still need the air to be able to go through, so you oil it up so the dust particles will get caught in here, and just the air gets to end up going through. That's about the carburetor I want to mention is the choke. The choke. So I come over to this bike and I open up the throttle wide open. Okay. You think that, or some people think that, okay, I'm filling up the bike with gas. And you're essentially not doing that. In fact, you're not doing anything. It's not that, this is not hooked up to a fuel pump. It's not pumping fuel into the engine when you do this. It's just lifting the slide up. That's all it's doing. And in fact, it's doing the opposite. It's letting more air in than fuel. It's opening up. So essentially when you first go to start your bike, it's cold and it can't really evaporate the gas. So you need to actually pull in more gas. If you open up your throttle, it's a lot harder to create a suction whenever you have this big, tube that just directly sucks in air. You want this closed. And they have this choke that you turn the choke on, and it helps to close off this air, but as long as you keep the throttle closed. And then it just sucks in gas and a little bit of air, so it's when you kick it over, it sucks in gas. And actually that's why if you come over to a bike and kick it over without starting it, you're actually sucking in gas if you have the throttle down. And that's actually can flood it out. Now if you flood out the engine, that means that you put too much gas into the engine and it's not going to start, because if you keep the throttle closed, you're still getting in more fuel, but you're not taking in any more air, and you've already got too much fuel. That's why, in that case, you hold the throttle wide open. So now, you're not pulling any more gas in, you're just pulling air in. But you've already filled your gas, your engine with gas, so that works out. The idle, this is the idle screw in this thing, and as you can see inside, it's just how this slide gets rested. That's all it does, is adjust the level at which this slide rests. That's the idle. So that's essentially the basics of the carburetor.